Okay, so I am going to go over this PLC plan, which is over student engagement and focus. So to jump in, this is our agenda. So we have the vision statement, the focused problem, the article, which helps support what I'm talking about in this plan today. Implementation 1, implementation 2, the wrap up, and then next steps. So in my vision statement, I talk a lot about how teachers are having to do a lot of redirecting and repeating themselves for students that lose interest or are not paying attention. And so, yeah, in my vision statement, I talked about how in my classroom, students will strive to be actively engaged in lessons with a management system that is structured around consistent and constant engagement that is rewarded the more that students participate. So my vision is that with the right management system, students are engaging with lessons in a visual, auditory, and collaborative way that's supported by the teacher's foundation of trust and love in the classroom. So this foundation will help produce more respect in the classroom, respect for you as the teacher, and then respect for other students and peers in the classroom. This will help reduce that redirecting and that repeating yourself in the classroom. So in this PLC project, this is a little bit more like a table of contents, so this is exactly what is going on. So here you see there is a part 1, which is like the requirements. So that would be the identifying the problem that's in the classroom, selecting that strategy or that intervention, which is a management system. And then step 3, we're going to plan that strategy, that article. We're going to talk about that article that supports the strategy that we're using. And then the part 2 requirements, we'll have talking about that intervention, the feedback changes, and then we'll summarize and analyze that data, and then we'll reflect on those next steps. So step 1 is the problem. So kind of something that you can ask yourself as a teacher is like, what behavioral management strategies do you use in your classroom currently? And what kind of behavioral management issues are you still having in the classroom even after those behavioral management strategies are being implemented? So in my classroom, when I was student teaching, the students often struggled with just that sustained focus and attention. So I found myself repeating myself, or students with ADD, ADHD, behavioral defiant disorders, they would find themselves distracted, and I would have to do a lot of redirecting. Hey, come back to this topic. So yeah, so another, that is just kind of due to a lack of engagement, a lack of intention. So hopefully with this behavior management system, which is also kind of a teaching system, a way of teaching, we will help more actively engage these students in the classroom. So the strategy that we are planning on using is to increase active listening and engagement. It's through whole brain teaching. It is like a teaching strategy, but it's also a management system all rolled into one big package. This strategy requires a high level of constant engagement and active participation in the classroom, and the more that they participate and show attention, the more rewarded they get, which means the more likely that they are to continue to participate. So specific strategies within the whole brain teaching that we will cover in this PLC is that step 1, the class yes, the second portion, which is mirror mirror, then you have the classroom scoreboard, and then you have teach okay. So those are the 3 things that we're going to go over. So step 3, so this is the article that is been placed in here that talks about whole brain strategies and how that this is supported. So from this, you can see that It talks about the findings of the study that confirmed that adopting whole brain teaching approach was helpful in increasing students' involvement. The intervention allowed children to see, say, and hear, and then move physically, which resulted in emotional involvement in the lessons that were prevented. So this is showing that it is activating a lot of different parts of the learning spectrum. So all those different learning intelligences that students have in your classroom are being brought into this lesson to help reach every single learning style. So step 3, the second portion of this, is the implementation. So this is a quick rundown of the strategies and the expected outcome of these strategies. So the first one you have here is the class yes. So what happens is when you introduce this to your class, you show them what exactly is expected of them. So when you say class, class, they are to respond with yes, yes. And if you say class, class, they are to respond with yes, yes. And so not only when they hear that call and they respond with their yes, yes in the exact same way that you called it, they are to turn their bodies towards you. They are to fold their hands in their lap. And they are to put their eyes on you and close their mouths. So they are listening to you, they are looking at you, they're focused on you, and they're sitting still. So this is a really good quick redirection. So if students aren't on task to begin with, or if they're in the middle of a group activity and you're ready to transition to them, you say class, class, and they say yes, yes, and they turn, stop, look, and listen, face you. And one of the things that they teach you about this is that if not everybody does it, you continue to say class, class, and you walk towards that person and you have your eyes focused on that person that is not participating in your call and response. And typically that focus and that determination, that typically not necessarily intimidates them, but that intense focus will typically grab their attention and pull them and redirect them into asking what you want them to do. So that would be the first strategy. So that's part 1. So grabbing their attention, getting their attention, this is good for redirection and for flow and transitions into other things. So the second one is mirror, mirror. So this is what students do what you do and say what you say. So when you typically introduce this, you explain to them when I say mirror, mirror, then you typically make a hand gesture and you will say mirror on, and then students will mirror exactly what you do and repeat exactly what you say. So if you say I am this tall, then they will respond with I am this tall. And so this is a really, really great way for students to repeat directions, repeat instructions, just to follow what you follow, get some movement in their bodies, and help put a physical movement to maybe a vocab word that you're teaching them. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use this strategy, but them having to repeat what you say and do what you do means that they have to be focused on you, and because they're having to participate, they're having to be engaged. So there's a lot less time of that distraction and that redirection. So, and then when you're done, you just say mirror off, and then they will stop doing what you're doing and they will watch you some more. So a lot of these strategies have to deal with constant involvement of talking, chatting, but they have to do with keywords that you're saying and doing. So they really have to stay focused and engaged on you so that they're able to follow what you're following. So another part of this, the next portion is the class scoreboard. So this is like the reward portion. So you have like a smiley face and a frowny face on the board, and what you do is when you say class, class, and they say yes, yes, and they're all in tune and they all turn and they focus, and it was really great. You give them a little tally on the on that check, on that positive smiley face, and when you do that, they get to make this reward of oh yeah. And so they get a little moment to cheer for themselves and get excited. And let's say you called them class, class, yes, yes, and only half the class responded. So that was not what you expected or what you wanted, so you're not going to reinforce that. So you would give them a little tally on the negative side. And then this is when they'd go, oh, and so they put their hands out, whatever kind of hand signal that you want to do with them. Then they have a whole class pity party there for a second, and then you move on. So this is to continue to reward your students. So this is something that you do often throughout the lesson. it's just that pace just keeps going. One thing to keep in mind is that when you're doing this tally is that students should not be any more than 3 tallies apart on the positive and the smiley faces, frowny faces. So when you get more than 3 tallies apart, students get discouraged because it's harder to like catch up, and so students are less likely to buy into your scoreboard system. So then at the end, if they win, you can give them a little reward like 5 minutes of free chatting or a chat with a partner, whatever you want to do. There's lots of different free, simple rewards that you can offer your class if they win at the end of the day or at the end of the period, depending on how your class structure is set up. The last thing on here is the 4th technique, which is teach okay. So what happens is you will teach them something, whether you do motions, hand signals, whatever, you introduce a new concept, and then you give your students this signal you're going to teach to your shoulder partner or whoever, and so then you'll say, teach, and then they'll respond with okay, and they'll turn to their shoulder partner and back and forth, and they'll teach each other whatever. If you're working on vocabulary, they'll explain the vocabulary and they'll map it out, draw it out, dance it out, however they want to teach it, and then their partner will either correct them if they have wrong information, or they'll turn around and they'll also teach them the same concept. So it's that continued repetition of learning, and that means that everybody has to be involved because it's more one-on-one even than the whole class teach okay, or the whole class mirror. So that's another way to keep students really involved and keep them engaged and listening and less redirecting in your classroom. Step 4, so these next steps. So some things to consider is that students can be a little overwhelmed if you implement all 4 of these at the same time. So it's important to start with one thing like the class yes, the call and response, and once they've mastered that, then you'll introduce the next step like the scoreboard, and then mirror, and then teach okay. So instead of introducing all of these at one time, you will introduce them one at a time until they reach mastery. When students respond really well, you can continue to dive further into some of these strategies for whole brain teaching, and you can add more and more as you are ready to. But these are the 4 basic ones that will help you get started in helping increase that engagement in your classroom. So the more opportunities that students are given to do the teach okay, the more engaged that they are with other peers, which builds that community, and it also gives them a moment to not have to just sit and listen in a lecture style classroom, but really engage and communicate and collaborate with their peers. So since I'm not currently teaching in this moment, I do not have a great way to collect and analyze this data. Having experienced a PLC on whole brain before and having used some of these strategies previously in student teaching, I can tell you from experience that I had a lot less redirecting in my classroom and repeating myself when I implemented these strategies. Whole brain teaching is something that you can use from pre-K all the way up to 12th grade, and it all just kind of depends on how you introduce it and implement it in your classroom. I will say that I think that it could have really positive effects in the classroom. I think naturally, the more that you engage and increase that active participation in the classroom, naturally you're going to have less distractions and redirections because people will be engaged in what you're doing. So naturally they won't have time to need that redirection or that refocus. So the last thing to talk about is this summary and conclusion. So overall, whole brain teaching has some really, really great options, not only to improve some teaching strategies that you use in your classroom, but also specifically management strategies to help increase engagement in the classroom. I think that this is a great teaching style behavior management program that can be implemented for any level of students and grade levels. However, I will say one drawback or limitation that this strategy could have would be in special ed classrooms. So I have not read a lot of studies using this in the special ed classroom, and depending on the severity of the special education needs of your students, this may or may not work well at all in special education classrooms. But outside of that, I think that there is great opportunity for these to be used and implemented in the classroom. So the goal of this PLC project is to increase students' engagement and to limit that time wasted redirecting students back to the topic. So I hope that this is really helpful.